Hey guys and gals and my fellow VEDS-ies, welcome back to another day of VEDS. Today, I kind of want to talk about something that we don't really have an answer to, but I think I might be able to figure it out. As I have no doubt probably mentioned a bunch of times this month and in years prior, I love Disney and I love...
Alright, I get it! Come inside.
So you can imagine my excitement when around the 2010s, they announced that on one of the cruise ships, they were going to be making an entire stage show centered around the villains. This was called Villains Tonight. Villains Tonight, for those of you who may be unaware, though I do recommend watching Disney Dan's, I'll have it linked in the description of the video, his video talking about the show more in depth. But the basic concept of the show was that it starred Hades from Hercules, who years after, I guess, his battles with Hercules, had kind of softened. He had lost his evil. He had turned the underworld into the Thunder World.
Bad pun! Yeah.
That is until the Fates arrive to tell Hades that if he does not fill his evilometer up to the top within one night, he will no longer be able to rule the underworld. And while it is centered around the Disney villains, it's kind of a musical comedy. None of it's really taken super seriously, a point that I will bring up once again in just a few minutes. But for now, I want to talk about two segments that they kind of advertised heavily being in the show, one especially, but never actually made it to a finished version, at least not for very long. The first segment is something that, to my knowledge, never actually made it onto the stage. It was just shown to the public as a piece of concept art in one of the original videos sort of advertising the show and showing rehearsals. This was a segment centered around Chernabog, the devilish creature from Night on Bald Mountain from Fantasia. I have no clue where this would have happened in the show. I kind of don't see any place where they could have slapped it in. However, the only piece, again, is that concept art. And in that concept art, the reason why I think this segment was ultimately cut is because in said concept art, there is the actor playing Hades alongside the video screen showing sort of Night on Bald Mountain and a giant Chernabog head presumably rising from the lift in the front of the stage. This would have probably been a massive prop. Probably way too massive to store on the cruise ship. So that is my reason why Chernabog never made it. Though, based on Night on Bald Mountain, there is another reason. But for that reason, we have to talk about number two. Scene number two that actually did make it to the stage is Friends on the Other Side from Princess and the Frog, starring Dr. Facilier. This was a scene that they believed in a lot because they heavily advertised it in a lot of the promotion. Keep in mind, this was around the same time that Princess and the Frog was being advertised very heavily. So of course they did. But where did this fall into the show? Now, there is not any guest footage of this show. The only surviving footage of this number that I know that exists is from the actor who actually portrayed Dr. Facilier. He posted it as, I guess, part of his reel or separately, which is where a lot of this footage is going to come from. Now, where this would have happened in the show is right after Pain and Panic are tasked with bringing the invitations to Maleficent and the Evil Queen. They exit off stage. And this is when Hades starts to get sort of introspective, sort of being like, I'm evil, how could the Fates say this? The Fates must be wrong. I want a second opinion. So he calls upon Dr. Facilier to read his palms, tell his fortune, and to see if the Fates are actually right.
My brother, this ain't good at all. Why? What does it mean? It means those Fates do speak the truth. You do need evil to remain head of the dead, but lucky for you, I got friends.
This is the point in the show where I think we all can kind of figure out why they would cut it, for a multitude of reasons. Number one, it is the only section of any Disney Cruise Line show, to my memory, that would have taken place completely in the dark. No lights at all except for the, sort of the backlit costuming for the puppets, for the Friends on the Other Side, and for Facilier's hats and spats and stuff like that. So apart from being a safety issue, we also have to remember Disney's target audience. Children. This is a family, sort of cruise ship. Kids are mostly afraid of the dark.
Kids are scared of the dark.
You're afraid of the dark too, Marv. You know you are.
So you would have completely dark stage with a bunch of these really freaky looking friends on the other sides coming out and running over the audience. Kids probably got very scared. And when the kids got scared, their parents probably complained to guest services, who then told the creative team, yeah, you gotta cut this number. So again, I'm thinking it's a safety thing, although I'm obviously not a performer on the ship, so I can't say that for certain. I think the more reasonable explanation is that it kind of did scare kids. Now, I know some people are going to agree with me in saying it's a show about the Disney villains. The idea that it would be a little scary should kind of be obvious, but when you do watch the finished show that is available on YouTube, the finished show again is very campy. It's very funny. None of the villains, by and large, are really taken seriously. They're all sort of subversions of what we know from their original films.
And there, my faithful huntsman, you will kill her.
He's not my boyfriend. We just had an interesting weekend together once on Castaway Cay.
Any way you like, poison them, drown them, bash them in the head. You got any chloroform? I don't care how you kill the little beast, but do it!
And now, on with the show. Lock up your puppies. I give you Protect Cruella.
Your Majesty certainly has a way with dumb animals.
I would be nothing without you.
The only exception to this, again, would have been Facilier. So again, I think that's why he was cut. However, him being cut did cause sort of a problem at the end of the show. Towards the end of the show, Maleficent and Evil Queen show up again, and they bring all the villains along. And there's a section of the show where they sing,
So he won round one. So that's it. End of story.
All right, look,
you give up and throw in the towel and hand the hero his glory. Well, not my book.
and then all of the villains sort of say, nor were mine, nor were mine.
Nor mine.
Nor mine. Nor mine.
Or mine. Or mine.
Nor mine.
The problem is, without Facilier, there's one extra verse of nor were mine to be sung. Granted, they were kind of able to salvage this because there's one villain who is one actor who plays a dual role as two different villains. The same guy who plays Jafar also plays Scar. So if you look very carefully at some of the footage, the Jafar actor dressed as Jafar has to say nor were mine twice, and he has to kind of say it with a different inflection.
Nor mine.
Nor mine. Nor mine.
Or mine. Or mine.
Nor mine.
But again, going back, I think it was a safety thing, but again, I can't prove that. But I think the more likely reason was a safety thing. Or not safety, it was too scary. Which again, is also why I think Night on Bald Mountain got the axe. Night on Bald Mountain would be very scary to a kid. And there's nothing to say about that concept art that would have said it would have been a subversion of that number. But that's just what I think. What do you guys think in the comments down below? Do you think I've kind of hit the reason? If you manage to work on the show, if any people from the cruise ship watches this, and you can provide any insight, let me know in the comments down below. And until tomorrow, guys, gals, and my fellow VEDS-ies, I will see you tomorrow.